What's good? What's good? How y'all doing? Yeah, he is I and I am him. Big J all day, aka the mighty Big J. Welcome to another episode of the Hype Show. Thank you again for joining me. If you're new to the channel, please be sure to subscribe and like this video. If this isn't your first time, like and comment anyway. Appreciate you joining me. We're going to get right into it. We're going to talk about the rest of the results of the Week 7 action in the NFL and get the schedule all completed and go over the wins and losses there. And we're going to touch a little bit on the NBA season tipping off here tonight before we close out the show. The defending champion Denver Nuggets open their season at home against the Los Angeles Lakers. That game is taking place actually at 7:30 Eastern on TNT. And also after that, the Phoenix Suns will be visiting the Golden State Warriors. That game will be taking place also on TNT. Following that, at I believe 10 p.m. or 10 p.m. Eastern. So be able to catch both of those games back to back here to kick off the NBA season. So let's get into the results of the NFL here and go over all that here first. And then, like I said, we'll end the show with the NBA season here a little bit. The first game we're going to talk about here, the kick off the Sunday schedule, was the Las Vegas Raiders at the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears got the victory in that one. 30-12 was the final score. Justin Fields did not play for the Chicago Bears. He was out with a dislocated thumb on his throwing hand, so he was not available. But that didn't really matter. Rookie Tyson Bagent came in here. He's the rookie out of Shepherd University, a school I had never heard of before. He came in and did what he needed to. He was 21 of 29 for 162 yards and a passing touchdown. And he also scrambled 3 times for 24 yards. For Las Vegas, Jimmy Garoppolo missed a second straight game with the back injury, so they went with actually the 2 quarterbacks here because they struggled all day. Brian Hoyer got the start, and he was 17 of 32 for 129 yards, but he did throw 2 interceptions. Aiden O'Connell came into the game for him later in the game and was 10 of 13 for 75 yards, and he had a touchdown, but he also threw an interception as well. So not a great day for the Las Vegas Raiders. They had 3 turnovers as a result of those interceptions that were thrown. As far as the rushing aspect here, the Las Vegas Raiders only got 39 yards on the ground as a team, with Josh Jacobs leading the way with 11 carries for 35 yards. On the flip side for Chicago, Deontay Foreman here, he had a wonderful day here. Their top 2 running backs were actually top 3 running backs were out for this game here, including Rashawn Johnson. He was out with a concussion, actually, and they had already lost Khalil Herbert to injured reserve a couple weeks back. So they were on their 3rd and 4th running backs here. But Deontay Foreman, he was actually a healthy scratch just a couple weeks ago and got the start with 16 carries for 89 yards and 2 touchdowns. Darrington Evans came behind him with 14 carries for 48 yards. They had 173 yards on the ground rushing as a team. So 323 total yards of offense here. Las Vegas, on the other hand, here they were able to get 235. So, just a great day for Tyson Bagent. And what the thing that really jumped out to me was that Tyson Bagent, being a rookie, he had this offense looking a lot better than Justin Fields had in the previous 2+ seasons that he's been running things for this team. So, it's something to watch and keep an eye on when Justin Fields does come back. Is will this offense continue to be that efficient, or was this just a one-hit wonder because of the fact they were playing the Raiders? We'll just have to see. As far as the receiving for Chicago, DJ Moore led the way with 8 catches for 54 yards, but he didn't find the end zone. Darnell Mooney had 4 catches for 32 yards, and Deontay Foreman got his 3rd touchdown on the day with 3 catches for 31 yards on a 17-yard catch for that touchdown. So he did it through the air and on the ground. He was very great and relief for the other running backs that have been injured here. For Las Vegas, on the flip side here, Devontae Adams, he had 7 catches for 57 yards, but didn't find the end zone. Jacoby Myers did find the end zone with 7 catches for 50 yards. Running back Zamir White was followed up with 3 catches for 26 yards. So very meager day. They did get the ball to Devontae Adams on 12 targets 7 times, but he didn't find the end zone. And he just hasn't, as a whole, been as effective as he can be because of the quarterback play that they have. He does have 3 touchdowns. But on the flip side here, the Devontae Adams, he's still their number 1 option. So I just feel as though they definitely need to get him involved every game. Then he needs to be involved in every game they play, plain and simple. But yeah, the Bears got their 2nd win on the day here in 3 weeks, actually. So they're looking pretty good. They still sit at the bottom of the division at 2-5. The Green Bay Packers, who we'll talk about later in the broadcast, with their loss to the Broncos, are at 2-4 above them. Minnesota, with their victory over the 49ers last night, which we'll talk about as well, they improved to 3-4. And with Detroit, we'll talk about them and the results they unfortunately had against Baltimore. They still sit on top of the division at 5-2. They're still a couple games clear of Minnesota, so nothing to worry about in the division for Detroit. But again, we'll talk about their loss to Baltimore and how things went there. On the flip side here, looking at the results for the Raiders, they still sit at 3-4 as a result of that loss, and they're still in second place in that division. Denver sits at the bottom at 2-5 despite their victory. The Los Angeles Chargers are just above them at 2-4, and leading the way with the top record in all of the AFC is the Kansas City Chiefs at 6-1. So, like I said already, this is the Chiefs division, and it's theirs to lose. Nobody else is looking like they're going to win this division. They're already 3 games ahead in the division with 7 games played. So we'll just have to see what happens. They've already beaten Denver. They've already beaten Los Angeles, and they've got Denver this coming Sunday. So we'll get more into that here in a bit, though. But yeah, looking back at the Raiders-Bears game here, the Bears looked very good on offense, and they were very efficient with Tyson Bagent. He knew how to run the offense really well, and that was actually a pleasant surprise. So I'm sure he got the game ball after the game. I wouldn't be surprised about that. But the Raiders were favored by 3 points, and I was definitely wrong in my prediction on that. I thought the Raiders could do something despite not having Jimmy Garoppolo. You still got players like Adams and Jacobs in the lineup, but they just could not get it going on offense at all against a Bears team that struggled against the pass and the run in different aspects all year. I just find it kind of compelling that this Bears team is hanging around. A lot of the teams that were at the bottom actually won their games this past weekend, with the exception of the Arizona Cardinals. The Panthers, too, they didn't play this past weekend. So the teams at the bottom of the standings, a couple of them won games unexpectedly. The Patriots, who we'll also talk about with their victory, they won the game as well. So it feels like everybody that was at the bottom of their division decided to make some noise this past weekend, again, with the exception of the Panthers. So, like I said, we'll look at the results here. But looking back at the Bears here, with them 2-5 here, their next 5 games look like this here. They'll have the Sunday Night Football game coming up here at the Los Angeles Chargers on October 29th on NBC. Then the following week, they're at the New Orleans Saints, November 5th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they're home for a Thursday night football game against the Carolina Panthers, November 9th on Prime Video. 10 days later, they're at the Detroit Lions, November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then 8 days later, for Monday Night Football, they're at the Minnesota Vikings, November 27th on ABC. So yeah, therefore, their next 5 games are on the road. So that's going to be huge for them. This will really show if Chicago is for real or not. If, again, like I said, this was just a one-hit wonder with Justin Fields being out and Tyson Bagent getting a shot against the Raiders here. So, like I said, the Bears, I still see them as a team that's going to be picking higher in the draft, but this win definitely showed me something. They're not quite as awful as I thought they were. They're still a bad team, but they still got a chance to surprise some teams down the stretch here, especially if they're sitting players for playoff seeding, or if they're fighting for seeding necessarily and they just don't get it done. The Bears, I don't expect them to be a contender, but on the flip side, they're going to be in some games here. They actually definitely show this is definitely the best performance they had all year. Even with the way that they beat Washington, that had a lot more to do with just the offense getting going and just bum rushing the Washington Commanders early and often, because the Commanders, ever since that loss, they've kind of spiraled as well. So I just don't see that win as being that big, but this win was definitely a statement because you had a rookie quarterback come in and run the offense really well. So that was definitely huge. But of these next 5 games that they got, we'll just have to see, because again, will this be a one-hit wonder? Who knows? They're heading to Los Angeles on Sunday, and that's a cross-country trip. And I feel like the Chargers are going to come out a lot better than they did against the Chiefs. That Chiefs game, they just didn't look good, and Justin Herbert just didn't play that well. But at home in the comfort of their own confines, I think they'll be fine, the Chargers here. Going after that, we'll just have to see how the Bears are looking each from a week-to-week basis, because like I said, I don't expect them to contend in any games. The game coming up November 9th, which is a week from this Thursday, or actually 2 weeks from Thursday, that game could be a game that they could get against the Carolina Panthers, because the Panthers are an 0-6 football team. And again, they didn't play this past weekend, and I don't know where their win is going to come from. So if Chicago beats them, I wouldn't be surprised about that either. At Detroit, at Minnesota, those games are going to be tough towards the end of the month of November. So we'll just have to see what's going on with the Bears from a week-to-week basis. The Raiders, as I stated before, they're not a contender by any means, and I only see the Chiefs making the playoffs out of this division. They'll probably be the only team to make it. because if you look at the other divisions in the AFC, like the East, for example, they have a couple of good teams. The Jets are a wild card, and as far as how they've been playing. When you look at the AFC North, I feel like that's the toughest division in football right now as far as the teams, because the Bengals are 3-3. That's a 500 team, and they're in last place. So I look at that division. I look at that being a tough division. The AFC South will probably only have one team coming out of there as well, because there's 7 spots in each conference for the playoffs. So if you're looking at Bills, Dolphins, Jets, that's a few teams that could be in contention. The AFC North, as we speak right now, I can see all the teams being in contention. Cleveland could slip, but having a top defense will always keep you in the mix. But we'll just have to see with them. The AFC South, I can only see one team coming out of that, possibly the Jaguars for sure. And then the AFC West, the Chiefs coming out of it. So I feel like the AFC South and AFC West will have the division winners, and the wild cards will come from the North and East. That's a very early prediction because, like I said, things can happen from week to week. We're still a couple months away, but that's just how I feel about the AFC as a whole. So. The Raiders, though, looking at their schedule, they're kind of in the same boat as Chicago, and I had them winning this game. So the fact that they're not able to beat the Bears, that just kind of just goes to show you what kind of team they are. Whether Jimmy Garoppolo was in the lineup or not is inconsequential to me, because the Bears just played really well and they just fired on all cylinders. So I just don't know if he would have made that much of a difference. The Raiders are at the Bears for Monday Night Football, October 30th here on ABC. Then they're home for the next couple of games after that. They're visiting New York Giants. Will be there November 5th at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox. And then they're home again for Sunday Night Football against the Jets, and that's November 12th on NBC. Before they travel to Miami, November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern for their game against the Dolphins, and that'll be on CBS. So, like I said, the Raiders, I just don't have any faith in them. After that Miami game, they're home against the Kansas City Chiefs, and that'll be at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on November 26th. That'll be Thanksgiving weekend. That sounds like a loss to me. One thing about the Allegiant Field is the turf. Kelsey, earlier in the season when he kind of tweaked his ankle against the Vikings a couple weeks back, that he was just trying to get planted on turf, and he just kind of yipped his ankle a bit. There's been an argument about replacing all the stadium's turf with grass, the ones that don't have a natural grass surface, and they said they can't do it, but that's just a small tidbit to keep an eye on with Travis Kelsey. He doesn't really like turf very much, but looking at the Raiders, they could possibly beat the Giants, but at the same time, the Giants actually look good against the Commanders this past weekend with their backup quarterback as well. So if you're losing the backup quarterbacks and a rookie backup quarterback at that in Chicago, what are you going to do against Tyrod Taylor? Because he's been in the league a while. He's just a journeyman, but he's not a rookie by any means. So the Raiders, I don't really see anything on the schedule. Optimistically, they could be 2-3 at best, but with the Lions, the Chiefs, and the Dolphins coming up in the next 5 weeks, those don't sound like wins to me. The Giants and Jets, you may be able to do something, but the Jets are playing good football, and the Giants had a good weekend, so we'll just have to see. Looking at the next game here coming up on the Sunday schedule that we had happen here. Oh yeah, sorry about that. The Indianapolis Colts here, they hosted the Cleveland Browns, and then Cleveland squeaked by with a victory of 39-38 here, the final here. The Browns improved to 4-2. The Colts unfortunately fall to 3-4. Deshaun Watson did get the start for this Cleveland Browns team, but unfortunately he was 1 of 5 with an interception before he was knocked out of the game with what they believe to be a concussion. He was placed under concussion protocol. He wasn't able to play for the rest of the game. He wanted to play, but they ended up putting P.J. Walker out there. He was very meh. He was under 50% completion percentage. He was 15 of 32 for 178 and an interception. He didn't throw any touchdowns. Cleveland's touchdowns came in the form of other ways, however. For Gardner Minshew for the Colts, he was 15 of 23 for 305 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. I'm looking at the running game. That was where each team kind of put in that work. Cleveland, Jerome Ford had 11 carries for 74 yards and 1 touchdown, and Kareem Hunt came behind him with 10 carries for 31 yards and 2 touchdowns. Pierre Strong had 8 carries for 25 yards, and as a team, they had 150 yards on the ground. So 166 through the air and 178 through the air and 150 on the ground. So 328 yards of total offense for the Cleveland Browns. And I think the defense is definitely what made a statement in this game. As far as running the football, Indianapolis did have 178 yards on the ground. So Indianapolis got the yardage, and it definitely was a shootout. But Cleveland stopped them in key moments, and that's what counted here. Jonathan Taylor had 18 carries for 75 yards and a touchdown. Zach Moss had 18 carries for 57 yards as well, but he didn't find the end zone. Gardner Minshew actually carried in 2 touchdowns on 3 carries for 29 yards. So he had 4 touchdowns in total for the game. So he had a terrific game here despite the loss. And looking at this team, I honestly feel like deep down in my heart, the Indianapolis Colts are going to be in games all year. They aren't the most talented team, except for at the running back position, but they're going to be in games all year as the season goes on, and they've shown that. Despite being a 3-4 football team, they're very scrappy. The Browns, on the flip side, I think with them, what's going to start to happen is attrition of losses through injuries. They've shown that they can stay in games as well, and this was definitely a shootout. But injuries are going to start to catch up with this team here. And I truly hope that they can stay in the mix, but that division is very tough. So we'll just have to see down the road how they look. But they definitely pulled out the victory here in Indy. That was a very, very good defeat. A very good win for them. And a horrible defeat for Indy. But like I said, Indy will still be in the mix. Again, Indianapolis fell to 3-4. They were just above Tennessee at 2-4, who had a bye week. Houston sits sits a half game above them at 3-3. They had a bye week as well. And Jacksonville, with their victory this past Thursday night, as I talked about over the Saints, they improved to 5-2. So Jacksonville sits at about a 1.5 game lead in that division, but things are still pretty tight. So, and then AFC North, that's a very tight division as well. Cleveland, with their loss, fell to 4-2, and Pittsburgh, with their victory, of course, over the Rams, we'll talk about that in a bit. They improved to 4-2. Of course, they have the tiebreaker because they beat Cleveland head to head. So, the Cincinnati Bengals, they didn't play, and they sit at 3-3. They had a bye week last week. And Baltimore, with their victory over the Lions, improved to 5-2. So they're just a half game ahead over Pittsburgh and Cleveland. Cleveland beat Baltimore head to head already. So this division is going to be very tight, as I predicted. This is the best division in football as we sit right now. So we'll just have to see how things shake up. But it looks very, very, very tight in the AFC North. The Browns, to me, let's go back to the receiving statistics, actually. For the Colts, Josh Downs actually had 5 catches for 125 yards and a touchdown on 6 targets. And Michael Pittman had 2 catches for 83 yards and a touchdown as well. So a couple of long bombs to each of those receivers to get those touchdowns, but those were huge for them, even though they didn't get the victory. On the flip side, for Cleveland, Elijah Moore led the way for them with 4 catches for 59 yards, but didn't find the end zone. And tight end David Njoku had 5 catches for 54 yards. And for the wide receivers, Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones, they each had 2 catches for 22 yards. So, as I was saying, getting back to this game here, the defense was definitely what made the difference for Cleveland. Myles Garrett actually had a blocked field goal. He actually literally jumped over the offensive line and blocked the field goal for the attempt for Indianapolis, so that saved some points off the board. And he had 9 tackles, 7 solo, and 2 sacks. So he sacked the quarterback twice as well. Myles Garrett is a beast, and that's what definitely keeps things honest for this defense as a whole. It's just their pressure up front. Their front 7 is amazing. They have a pretty solid secondary as whole, but they don't have to do much of the work because of that front 7 that they have. Greg Newsome, he plays really well at safeties and corner for them. So, they got a great team here. But with Zadarius Smith, that's also another guy who gets it done up front too. You also have Juan Thornhill at safety. He was previously with the Chiefs for a while. I actually like his play. He's pretty solid. Just as a whole, they have a great team. Grant Delpit, he led the way actually with 10 tackles. So Cleveland gets it done. They really do get it done, and I'm surprised. They're a very surprising 4-2 team, honestly, because I honestly thought with Watson being in and out, he'd have more of an effect on this team, but he really hasn't. They've had to use 3 different quarterbacks to start the game this season, but they've still found ways to win because when you have a defense that's that reliable, that's what's going to keep you in games. Cleveland is at Seattle this Sunday, the 29th at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They're home against the Arizona Cardinals November 5th at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they're back on the road at Baltimore November 12th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they're home against the Pittsburgh Steelers November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before they travel to Denver November 26th. That game is at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So the Cleveland Browns, I mentioned this in a previous broadcast, that last game at the end of November against Denver, that I could see them giving Russell Wilson problems with that pressure. Because Russell Wilson has had problems with pressure against lesser teams with a lesser up front, front seven. So that's going to be rough. But Cleveland, to me, just because their offense is just not as solid as it could be, Jerome Ford is actually going to miss a game or two with a high ankle sprain that he suffered in this previous game against Indianapolis. So they're probably going to be relying on Kareem Hunt and Pierre Strong Jr. to start to share the tandems for running backs for Cleveland. With them losing guys here so often, that's going to create a problem down the line. But all football teams have guys that are dinged up. I've said this many times. That's the nature of football. But if Cleveland plays well and continues to play above their skis, they've now won 2 games in a row. They could be optimistically 3-2 over their next 5 games. The Baltimore and Pittsburgh games are going to be tough because those are AFC North matchups. But I could see them beating Arizona a week from Sunday, and I could see them beating Denver at the end of November with the defense that they have. They can make things tough on Hobbs for Arizona, or Dobbs, excuse me, and Russell Wilson, respectively, for Denver if he's still in the lineup. Because, again, that's about 6 weeks away. So, yeah, this Cleveland Browns team, they really do have solid players on defense, and I'm going to keep reiterating that because that's what's going to keep you in games. On the flip side for the Colts here, looking at their schedule, I feel like this was just a lost opportunity more than just a complete domination by Cleveland. Cleveland played really well, but Indianapolis had a chance throughout the game. So I'm falling to 3-4. Their next game coming up here is this Sunday home against the Saints, 1 p.m. Eastern on October 29th on Fox. Then the following week, they're at the Carolina Panthers at 4:05 p.m. Eastern, November 5th on CBS. They travel to Germany to face the New England Patriots on November 12th for an international game at Frankfurt Stadium in Germany. They get the bye week after that coming back from Germany before they face off against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home, 1 p.m. Eastern, November 26th on CBS. Then the week after that, they travel to Tennessee to take them on take the Titans on in a 1 p.m. Eastern showdown, December 3rd on CBS. So Indianapolis Colts, to me, that Patriots game is going to be very interesting because, again, going to a foreign country to play a game where you have no home field advantage, it takes a little bit of pressure off, but it does make things more of a level playing field because of the fact that you are playing overseas. So that game is going to be a pick 'em. I'll have more of a prediction as they get closer to that. But this Sunday home against the Saints, they could give the Saints problems. We'll talk. I spoke about them in their Thursday night matchup against the Jaguars and how things didn't go well for them. Derek Carr definitely needs to get on pace and get on the same page with his receivers for sure if that offense is going to have any success. And Indianapolis, they look to be a pretty solid team and can definitely kick you in the face when they want to. So this coming Sunday, I'll have an official prediction for that game for you, but I'd be very careful if I were the Saints here facing the Colts. At Carolina, I could see the Colts taking that game just due to the experience that they have. Carolina can make some explosive plays with the players that they have, but the long game, the game that's going to sustain them, that's going to belong to Indianapolis, I feel like, because they've shown that they can tough it out and have long games and play the full 60 minutes with you. So that game coming up here, I'm going to take the Colts to win that one. Like I said, I'll have predictions for the games coming up further down the line, but I can see this Colts team being like a 3-2 team. I won't say 4-1 because that would just mean they're playing their best football that they could over the next 5 to 6 week period if you include the bye. So we'll just have to see. But their next few games heading into the bye, I can see them taking probably all 3 optimistically, but we'll just have to see how that goes here. The next game we're going to talk about here, as far as the results and how things went down for that, the Buffalo Bills were at the New England Patriots here, and the Patriots got the victory 29-25 here. Very surprising result here. I had Buffalo winning that game, but New England definitely came to play, and can be in the division here. The Bills unfortunately fall to 4-3, and then Patriots improved to 2-5. They had only had one victory all season, and that was over the Jets earlier in the year. So nice to get back in the winning column. Mac Jones was 25 of 30 for 272 yards with 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. So pretty clean football game for him. He didn't have any fumbles either, so no turnovers on his part. On the flip side here for Buffalo, Josh Allen was 27 of 41 for 265 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. and also rushed the ball for 7 carries and 17 yards and a touchdown as well. So 3 total touchdowns and 1 interception for Josh Allen. The team ran for the ball for 81 yards as a team to New England's 96. Ramondre Stevenson for New England had 9 carries for 34 yards. Ezekiel Elliott did find the end zone with 11 carries for 31 yards. For Buffalo, the only other rushing attack was James Cook. He had 13 carries for 56 yards, but didn't find the end zone. As far as Kendrick Bourne with 6 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown. Demario Douglas had 4 catches for 54 yards, but didn't find the end zone. And Pharaoh Brown also followed that up with 2 catches for 51 yards. On the flip side for Buffalo, Dalton Kincaid, tight end, had 8 catches for 75 yards. Wide receiver Stephon Diggs had 6 catches for 58 yards and a touchdown on 12 targets. And running back James Cook added another 3 catches for 46 yards and a touchdown. So James Cook was able to get a touchdown through the air as opposed to on the ground and had 102 yards of total yards from scrimmage. This game, to me, even though Buffalo outscored New England 22-16 in the second half, New England had a 13-3 lead at halftime, and it really took a while for Buffalo's offense to get going. Josh Allen threw an interception on the first play from scrimmage when they got the ball. That can't happen, and that's the problem that the Bills have had is the uneven games by Josh Allen. And that's what kind of worries me about this team. I expected them to kind of keep contention with Miami, and they're kind of sort of able to due to Miami's loss to Philly, which we'll talk about towards the end of the broadcast. But Buffalo on their own needs to show that they can take this division and kind of show that they got what it takes to stay consistent. This was one of those games where I just had them winning just due to the way that they've been playing, but they've been very up and down. They've shown that they can have great games, and they've shown that they can have disappointing games, kind of like the Jets to start the season. So with Buffalo, looking at their schedule here, I expect them to bounce back. We can take a look and see what their games are going to be like. They have a quick turnaround here. They have a Thursday night game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here. They'll be hosting them here this Thursday, the 26th, 8:15 p.m. Eastern on Prime Video if you have that available. Their next game is 10 days after that at Cincinnati for Sunday Night Football, so they'll have a full 10 days after that. They're going to be hosting the Denver Broncos for Monday Night Football that following Monday, so another primetime game here. They got a few primetime games coming up, and because they're the Bills, that's going to happen. So I'm not surprised by that. Again, they'll be hosting the Broncos for Monday Night Football November 13th, 8:15 p.m. Eastern on ABC. The following Sunday, they host the New York Jets November 19th. That's at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Before they travel to Philadelphia to face the Eagles November 26th at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS as well. Honestly, the Bills to me are going to be tough to predict until they can string some sort of like actual consistency together and some sort of wins together, because the teams that they beat in a stretch early in the season were the Raiders, the Commanders, and the Dolphins, excuse me. The Dolphins are awesome on offense, but when it comes to playing teams that are contenders in a sense, they just don't play that well. So that 3-game winning streak that they went on before they lost to Jacksonville over in London week 5 didn't really prove anything to me as far as what they are. These next 5 games that they have are kind of a mixed bag here. Tampa, that one can go either way. At Cincinnati is going to be tough. I don't really expect much of a fight from Denver per se. We'll just have to see where they are a few weeks out. And then the Jets have already beaten them. So with them hosting the Jets, what's going to be different this time? We'll just have to see, because that's about, again, a month or so away. And then at Philadelphia is going to be a huge test at the end of the month of November. So if they can get another win off of Tampa Bay, that'll be fine. But I want to see them take on a contender and truly show them what's what. That's what I'm waiting on with Buffalo. Kind of the same thing I'm waiting on with Miami. But Miami is still ahead of this team as far as the standings. Miami sits at 5-2. Buffalo is 4-3, with the Jets just behind them at 3-3. And New England still sits at 2-5 at the bottom of the division. The Jets had a bye week, so they didn't play. Looking at the Patriots schedule on the flip side here, I called them to lose this game, and I was obviously wrong about that. Mac Jones had his best game in a while, so we'll just have to see if they can hold that down. Because prior to this victory, and then prior to losing to the Raiders the previous week, they had gotten outscored 72-3 by the Saints and Cowboys, respectively. So They weren't just losing, they were getting beat up for a while. So this was a nice win for them. Now they're at Miami this coming Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Before they get another game at home against the Washington Commanders, November the 5th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They have the international game, as I stated, with the Colts, November 12th, before their bye week as well. They're at the New York Giants, November 26th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox, before they host the Los Angeles Chargers, December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So taking the Patriots week by week is probably going to be the best thing to do at this current time. Because like I said, they've already won. They're 2-1 in their division. They did lose to the Dolphins early to start the year, but they've beaten the Jets and they've beaten the Bills. So in their division, they've played pretty solid football because that Miami Dolphins game was not a blowout. They had a chance to actually win that game late. So at Miami, this will be their second clash with them, and it'll just be. I'll just have to see if New England can keep pace with them on offense. I highly doubt it because they have a great offense in Miami. What cost them a game is and against the Eagles. We'll talk about that in a few here. But as far as Miami, they still have a great offense. They're still tops in a lot of categories. So I can still see that being a problem for the Patriots. The Washington game is definitely a pick 'em. If that defense can rattle Sam Howell, they can probably take that game for sure. Because Sam Howell, Mac Jones, that's kind of level playing field. Even though Mac Jones has the experience over Sam Howell. But on a week-to-week basis, we'll just have to see what they are here. Optimistically, with the next 5 games that they have, including that bye week, so the next 6-week period, they could be 3-2. But I say that about a lot of teams because we just don't really know week to week. I've called a lot of these games wrong, and there's games that I've kind of called correctly because I saw things going a certain way, and that's just how the NFL is. So going forward here with the Patriots, it could be a week-to-week thing because they had lost 3 straight prior to beating the Bills, and they had lost 5 out of 6. They were a 1-5 team. So we'll just have to see. But with Miami, I can still see them losing because they can't keep up on offense, and I can see them turning around and beating Washington at home because of the defense and the players that they do have. So we'll just have to see with the Patriots. But I still don't expect them to be a contender down the stretch, and I still don't expect them to make the playoffs. So that's how that's wrapping up. But yeah, that was a great AFC East matchup here, and with the Patriots winning that gives them a leg up on the division. On the next game we're going to talk about next was also a divisional matchup here between the Giants and the Commanders. They were hosting the Commanders and were able to get the victory 14-7. The Giants scored both of their touchdowns in the second quarter and didn't score anything else for the rest of the game, but it was 14-0 at the half, and they were only able to hold the Washington Commanders to a third quarter touchdown. For New York, Tyrod Taylor started again in place of Daniel Jones. It was 18 of 29 for 279 yards with 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He also ran the ball 8 times for 25 yards. For Washington, Sam Howell was 22 of 42 for 249 yards and 1 interception. He didn't throw any touchdowns. He also ran the ball twice for 15 yards. So on the ground, the New York Giants got 106 yards rushing as a team to Washington's 76. Saquon Barkley led the way with 21 carries for 77 yards. For Washington, Chris Rodriguez Jr. led the way with 7 carries for 31 yards. Brian Robinson Jr. had 8 carries for 23 yards and also got a touchdown as well. So not much really going for Washington. This was a very low-scoring affair. For New York here, tight end Darren Waller had 7 catches for 98 yards and a touchdown. His first touchdown of the season. Jalen Hyatt had 2 catches for 75 yards, and Saquon Barkley also got his touchdown on through the air for 3 catches for 41 yards, including a 32-yard catch. So Saquon wasn't able to run it in, but he did get a touchdown through the air. For Washington, Terry McLaurin had 6 catches for 90 yards, and tight end Logan Thomas had 4 catches for 51 yards. So with Sam Howell, he targeted 8 different receivers and was able to get it to 6 of them, but just wasn't the day he wanted because he hasn't been able to find the end zone here in the last few weeks here. He had a pretty solid day against Denver, and he's had a couple of other great games, but just hasn't really been able to find the end zone. He had 3 touchdowns against Atlanta last week, and he had 2 against Chicago, but just hasn't been a consistency as far as finding the end zone. So Sam Howell, he has 9 touchdowns on the season, but they've come within the course of just 3 different games. So we'll have to see what he's able to do down the stretch here. But Washington, they're kind of on a tailspin at the moment. They definitely kind of need to get things figured out. On the flip side for the Giants, they were able to kind of get out of their tailspin a bit here and kind of get things going again. Like I said, with Washington, they started out 2-0, but they've lost 3 of their last 4 games. If you A lot of these games I expected them to win. I had them beating Chicago, and I had them winning their last few games. I had them beating Chicago, and I had them winning against the Giants, but just weren't able to close the deal. Sam Howell definitely took a step back. He's definitely kind of showing his novice as well, and he'll have a chance to get things right. But Washington losing this game kind of makes things tough for them in the division if they want to keep pace with Dallas or Philly even a little bit. So the Giants still sit at the bottom of the NFC East at 2-5. Washington is fell to 3-4, so they're just a game ahead of the Giants. But the Giants got the tiebreaker for the moment. Dallas is at 4-2. They had a bye week, so they didn't play. And Philadelphia, with their victory, improved to 6-1. Speaking of Washington, that's they'll be home against the Philadelphia Eagles this coming Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They're at the New England Patriots November 5th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox, and then they're at the Seattle Seahawks 4:25 p.m. Eastern, November 12th on Fox. They're back home against the New York Giants, who they'll face about 4 weeks away, November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they have a game on Thanksgiving at the Dallas Cowboys, 4:30 p.m. Eastern on CBS. That'll be on Thanksgiving. They play a Thanksgiving game this year. So, with Washington just kind of playing the way that they have here, they got to show me something as far as what they were. They looked good to start the season, but they beat Arizona and they beat Denver. Those aren't contenders. So, much like a lot of other teams, they beat up on the teams that aren't very good. So, we'll just have to see what they are here. Look down the stretch here. Losing at the Giants was pretty huge for them, and I didn't really see that coming. They'll play Philadelphia tough, but I just don't see them winning that game. They could go into New England and steal a victory, but as I mentioned earlier, the way that defense plays for New England, they could rattle Sam Howell. They could make things tough on him. So I'll have an official prediction on that one. But with Washington, the way they're playing, they could end up 1-4 with these next 5 games here, especially to close out November with the Giants and Cowboys, respectively. And at Seattle's not going to be a cakewalk by any means either because of the traveling across country aspect. They're traveling across 3 time zones. So that's going to have an effect on them that they may not be able to handle. But we'll see with Washington here. On the flip side here, the New York Giants, they needed that victory to kind of get them out of the cellar a bit and kind of get them kind of back in the mix of things here. They had lost 4 straight games prior to getting this victory, going all the way back to their Week 2 comeback victory at Arizona. So it had been a while since there's some winning had been done for the Giants, but they'll definitely take this one. They're playing against the New York Jets, October 29th here this coming Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. That's considered, like I said, a home game, but the Jets and Giants share a stadium, so the only difference will just be kind of the Giant stuff everywhere as opposed to Jet stuff. That's the only real difference, but they'll be familiar with the confines and with the environment. They're at the Las Vegas Raiders the following week, November 5th at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox, before traveling to Dallas November 12th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox as well. After that, they are also at the Washington Commanders November 19th, and that's 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox, before they head back home to host the Patriots on November 26th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So, yeah, these games coming up here, it's going to be hard to say with the Giants. They've been a pretty bad team over the last month or so, give or take. So it's hard to take them over anybody, to be honest with you. So we'll just have to see as we get closer to Sunday. I'll have a preview for you. But catching the Jets off of a bye week may be tough on them. But like I said, I'll have a firm prediction for that one. And then at the Raiders are not a good team, but neither are the Giants. It'll just be what players decide to show up and what side of the ball for each team plays the best. So things are looking kind of bleak. They could be 1-3. They could, 1-4. They could be 2-3. You just don't know with the Giants. But as I've already stated here, I just don't see them as a playoff team unless they can reel off like 5 wins in a row and get themselves back in a great position. I just don't see that because we're already 7 games in, and even if they were to say, for example, pull off a 5-game victory, that would put them at 7-5. Depending on what other teams were in the league, they still wouldn't be completely be in contention. So I just don't know if they're in it. I just see them as being out of it until further notice. Excuse me. The next game we're going to talk about here for the Sunday schedule here took place between the Atlanta Falcons. They were being hosted by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and got the victory in Tampa by a final of 16-13. This was to me a very underwhelming game here. Desmond Ritter turned the ball over 3 times in this game, but they're able to still squeak by with the victory, which is definitely what counts. They got the game-winning 51-yard field goal from Falcons kicker Younghoe Koo to end the game. And that's what sealed the victory for them. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have lost 2 games in a row, and they've now fallen to 3-3 after their 3-1 start prior to the bye. Yeah, they lost both of these games at home too, to Detroit the prior week and then to Atlanta this past week. So back to the drawing board. Tampa Bay is now in second place in the division with the Falcons taking the lead in the division at 4-3. Tampa sits at 3-3. The Saints are at 3-4, and Carolina, they had a bye week, so they sit at 0-6 at the bottom of the division. For Atlanta, Desmond Ritter, like I said, he did turn the ball over 3 times, and he didn't find the touchdown through any touchdowns through the air, but he did run one in. He was 19 of 25 for 250 yards, and he also didn't throw any interceptions, but 6 carries for 38 yards and the touchdown. That's where he got his scoring from. The team as a whole for Atlanta Falcons ran the ball for 156 yards on the ground. Tyler Algier had 21 carries for 59 yards, but didn't find the end zone. Cordarrelle Patterson had 10 carries for 56 yards. Rookie running back Bijan Robinson only had 1 carry for 3 yards before leaving the game. He's dealing with headaches of some kind here, and he said he'll be fine for this coming weekend, but he didn't really get much time as a result of that. As far as running the football for Tampa, they were only able to get 73 yards on the ground, with Rachaad White getting 13 carries for 34 yards, and Baker Mayfield being the second leading receiver with 3 carries for 32 yards. He was 27 of 42 for 275 yards with 1 touchdown, but he also had an interception in the third quarter. So yeah, just the offense as a whole for Tampa Bay just wasn't clicking, and it hasn't looked that great since coming off of the bye week. Typically, when a team comes off the bye week, that gives you time to clean things up, get people healthy, and get people acclimated and on one accord. But that just hasn't happened for Tampa. They're 0-2 out of their bye weeks, which is typical, not very typical unless you're just a flat out bad team. So we're going to have to assess Tampa Bay a little bit differently. I had them as an early surprise, but they've kind of fallen back to earth in a sense. Atlanta is the surprise team to me, but at the same time, it's really not, because this NFC South is a very muddled division, as I keep stating. So I just don't know who's going to do what in this division, and we really won't know until probably December, most likely. So on the flip side here, as far as the receiving here for the Atlanta Falcons, Drake London had 6 catches for 54 yards, but didn't find the end zone. Tyler Algier had 3 catches for 53 yards for a total of 112 yards in total from scrimmage. And tight end Kyle Pitts had 3 catches for 47 yards. For Tampa Bay, wide receiver Mike Evans had 6 catches for 82 yards and a touchdown on 8 targets. And wide receiver Chris Godwin also had 6 catches as well for 66 yards on 12 targets. Running back Rachaad White had 6 catches as well for 65 yards to add to his 34 on the ground, so he had 99 yards from scrimmage. And tight end Cade Otton had 5 catches for 43 yards. So as far as the football being distributed, Baker Mayfield found 6 different receivers and targeted 9. But I just think the difference here was that the Atlanta Falcons made the plays when they needed to at the right moments, whereas Tampa Bay made the wrong plays at the wrong moments. Especially that interception that Baker Mayfield threw to the Falcons in the third quarter, because that's what kind of gave them the momentum to take the lead and then hold on to it for the rest of the game. So difficult play for them, and they'll have to go back to the drawing board as a football team and decide what they're going to be, because they started out great, but these last 2 games out the bye week, they've stumbled. Back to the Atlanta Falcons. This Sunday, they're at the Tennessee Titans. That's at October 29th at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. But then they're back home for the Minnesota Vikings. That's November 5th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They travel to face the Arizona Cardinals at Arizona, and that's going to be taking place November 12th at 4:05 p.m. Eastern. They have a bye week after that before they host the New Orleans Saints, November 26th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they're at the New York Jets, December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox as well. Kind of a mixed bag of games here. Like if this were any other team, this would look like a light schedule. But because of what the Atlanta Falcons are and what they've shown so far, they've been an inconsistent team. Yes, they improved to 4-3, but they've just had moments where they've been bad and they've had moments where they've been great. They started out the season 2-0 and then lost 2. They won 1, lost 1, and then won at Tampa. So Tennessee is coming off of a bye week. So who's to say they don't look like the fresher team and they come out and beat these guys? I wouldn't be shocked by that. After that, they'll be home against Minnesota. Minnesota will still be without Justin Jefferson because that'll be the fourth game that he's missed as far as IR, and that'll be the last game he'll have to miss according to the rules. As far as whether he'll be ready after that, we won't know until that time. But Atlanta being home against Minnesota, they could take that game, but at the same time, we'll talk about Minnesota later in their broadcast with their victory over San Francisco last night. They showed some great poise on offense, and they looked really good as far as throwing the football. Kirk Cousins has been fantastic statistically, but it's starting to show up in the win column. So we'll talk about them as well. But I wouldn't sleep on the Vikings here, and that Falcons Vikings game could be a toss up unless Minnesota just absolutely gets it going. At Arizona is a game that I called earlier in the season a toss up, and I still feel that way. Even though Arizona and they're a 1-6 team, and Atlanta is 4-3, they're just really not that much better. They've just taken advantage of the moments later in the game to get the victory. They haven't blown anybody out. They beat Carolina by 2 touchdowns, sure, but they beat Green Bay by 1, they beat Houston by 2, and they beat Tampa by 3. That's 6 points in 3 games. So, like I said, they're not dominating anybody. So, I'll have predictions for Atlanta down the stretch, but like I said, this is a mixed bag of games, and they could probably go 3-2 with this schedule that they got coming up. I say that all the time, but at the same time here, the way that these games look here, that's honestly just genuinely how I feel based on what they've shown me so far. Until they show me otherwise that they could be a great team or be an awful team, that's just kind of how we take things for them. On the flip side, looking at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here and looking at their schedule and seeing how things are prognosticating for them, I did have them winning that football game, and it's unfortunate that they didn't. But they have little time to sulk. They have to turn around and visit the Buffalo Bills this Thursday, October 26th, on Prime Video. They're then at the Houston Texans November 5th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS, before they host the Tennessee Titans November 12th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They're then at the San Francisco 49ers, 4:05 p.m. Eastern, November 19th on Fox. And then they're at the Indianapolis Colts November 26th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So 4 of Tampa's next 5 games are on the road. They've already had 4 home games, and they're unfortunately 1-3 at home. So yeah, getting out on the road, they're going to have to prove that they got it for real, because at Buffalo this Thursday, that's going to be a tough game. And I'm not sleeping on the Houston Texans either. They play well at home. If you don't believe me, ask the Pittsburgh Steelers. So yeah, those next 2 games are going to be tough, especially on the road. And even coming back home to Tennessee, you'll still have a tough a tough haul to deal with Derrick Henry running the football. So we'll just have to see what Tampa Bay is here, but I could see them possibly being 2-3, 1-4, because they got the 49ers in that mix too. And the Colts, as we discussed earlier a bit here, they've looked like a very scrappy team. So the wheels could fall off the wagon really quick for Atlanta, or for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, excuse me. So we'll just have to see what they are. But yeah, these last few games have kind of brought them back to earth a bit after starting 2-0. They've definitely been brought back to earth, and we'll see if they can maintain this awful momentum they have, or see if they can bounce back Thursday against Buffalo. We'll just have to see. But I'm calling that Buffalo game a win now. We'll have an official preview this Thursday in our abbreviated episode of the Hype Show, but it just feels like a win for Buffalo, despite how they played this past weekend against New England. The next game we're going to talk about here was a very surprising result. I was definitely wrong about this one as well. The Baltimore Ravens blew the Lions out 38-6 in a game that was never close. They led this game 28-0 at halftime, and the Lions didn't even score until the fourth quarter. Huge win. They were up at a point of 35-0. It was just bad for Detroit. Detroit falls to 5-2. Again, this was just a whooping all the way around here. Detroit falls to 5-2. Baltimore improves to 5-2 here on their record as well, and they definitely lead the way in the AFC North, as I stated earlier. As far as Detroit, they still lead the way in the NFC North by 2 games over Minnesota at 5-2. So, despite the loss, and the victory for Baltimore, each team is leading their division at this current time. For the Baltimore Ravens here, as far as passing the ball, Lamar Jackson he was 21 of 27 for 357 yards and 3 touchdowns. And he also ran the ball 9 times for 36 yards with a touchdown as well. For Jared Goff, he was 33 of 53, but he didn't find the end zone and threw an interception. And running the football, Baltimore also dominated that by a total of 146 rushing yards to Detroit's 84. David Montgomery missed this game as well. He's still dealing with a rib issue, so Jamar Gibbs got the start. and got 11 carries for 68 yards and did find the end zone. And Craig Reynolds had 3 carries for 16 yards. For Baltimore, Gus Edwards led the way with 14 carries for 64 yards and a touchdown. And Justice Hill also added 4 carries for 46 yards. As far as passing the ball here, Jared Goff, he was pretty fair, but the majority of his yards went to a few different receivers. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 13 catches for 102 yards, but didn't find the end zone. Jahmyr Gibbs, he had 9 catches for 58 yards and also didn't find the end zone. And tight end Sam Laporte out of Iowa, 6 catches for 52 yards. For Baltimore, their leading receiver actually only had 1 catch. It was the running back Gus Edwards. He had the 1 catch, but it was for 80 yards. He didn't find the end zone, but it was an 80-yard catch, and it definitely got them set up to score a touchdown. Zay Flowers had 4 catches for 75 yards, and tight end Mark Andrews had 4 catches for 63 yards with 2 touchdowns. So Lamar Jackson, he does what he does. He had 4 total touchdowns, 3 through the air, 1 on the ground. And that's what made him a unanimous MVP a few seasons back. He definitely shown what he can do as far as his versatility. And this was very expected. I took Detroit to win this game close, but it just was never close. And if you're Detroit, you just have to go back to the drawing board. They just kicked your teeth in. That's just the only thing that you can take from this game is to just go back to the drawing board and just take it out on the next opponent. That's what you'll have to do. For Baltimore, looking at them and looking at their schedule here, they're sitting pretty at 5-2 before they travel to Arizona this Sunday, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Again, the AFC North is a very tight division, and even with this dominating victory, I'm not ready to hand the division to them quite yet. Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Cincinnati are all going to have something to say, and they still see all 3 of those teams over the course of the season. They've already played Pittsburgh and took that L, and they don't see them till the end of the season. So if you're Baltimore, I would hold your horses on saying that you're going to take the division. It's not quite where we are yet, but this definitely heads in the right direction. The following week, they're home against the Seattle Seahawks November 5th at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before hosting the Cleveland Browns November 12th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They have a Thursday night game, a quick turnaround against the Cincinnati Bengals November 16th on Prime Video. 10 days later, they're at the Los Angeles Chargers for Sunday Night Football November 26th. Then they have their bye week before hosting the Los Angeles Rams December 10th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So, yeah, just looking at this team as a whole, the Baltimore Ravens, I expect them to be one of the top 4 teams in the AFC. And I think that's where they sit at the moment. Things are very fluid and move from week to week, but they got themselves in a pretty solid position. As far as the conference, though, as far as the standings in the conference, I still don't see them as any good in comparison to the Kansas City Chiefs. And they're probably sitting on the same rung with the Dolphins. The Bills are just below that. So the Jaguars are probably on that same rung as well. So this thing is fluid and it's going to change week to week, but they definitely put themselves in a solid position with this victory, and they blew the Lions out. I just did not expect that. As far as the Lions go, again, they'll have to get back to the drawing board. They had won 4 straight games and 5 out of 6 to start the year before this loss. So the only thing they can really do is just lick their wounds and get back to work. They host the Las Vegas Raiders for Monday Night Football this coming week on October 30th. That'll be on ABC at 8:15 p.m. Eastern. They then get their bye week after that. So if they can get this win over the Raiders and then head into a bye week, that'll have them sound and where they back where they need to be again, excuse me. They're at the Los Angeles Chargers November 12th, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they host the Chicago Bears November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. That's going to be actually, the 19th, they host the Bears. Then they host the Green Bay Packers for Thanksgiving, November 23rd. That's the game that's going to kick off the schedule. 11 days later, they're at the New Orleans Saints. That game is taking place December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they're at the Chicago Bears December 10th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So Detroit, I feel like that they'll bounce back heading into their bye week. The 4 games after that are a mixed bag. The Chargers, Bears, Packers, and Saints is kind of a mixed bag, but they'll definitely be able to kind of navigate that and be a 3-1 football team after the bye. So I can see them being 4-1. This is the only game with them I've been wrong about. The Seattle game I figured would be a slugfest way back in week 2, and Seattle did get that victory in overtime. But with this game, I definitely still expected them to beat the Baltimore Ravens. Interesting statistic about Lamar Jackson. In his career, he is 16-1 against the NFC. 16-1 against the NFC. So, had I known that prior, I probably would have taken Baltimore. But hey, it is what it is. I expected Detroit to get it because of the way it looked the past month or so. So it is what it is here. But yeah, like I said, with the game coming up against the Raiders and then the bye week, I could see them being 4-1 over the course of this 5 to 6 week period, including that bye. But things change week to week. Things happen. You know, if Chicago plays well and plays above their skis, maybe they could take a game from them. Who knows? Same with Green Bay. But we're going to talk about Green Bay in a second here. And with their game against Denver, they just looked very stale on offense, to say the least. So we'll just have to see with them and see what they're about. The next game we're going to talk about here took place here with the Pittsburgh Steelers traveling to Los Angeles to visit the Rams and face them. The Pittsburgh Steelers were able to get their victory by a final of 24-17. The Pittsburgh Steelers were coming off of a bye week and definitely got a great victory to get them to 4-2. The Pittsburgh Steelers outscored the Rams 21-8 in the second half, and I think that was the difference because the Rams led 9-3 at the half. Unfortunately, the Rams fall to 3-4 on the schedule, and the Pittsburgh Steelers got Deontay Johnson back at wide receiver, and I think that definitely helped a bit. He was their second leading receiver, actually, behind George Pickens. And that definitely helped Kenny Pickett out. He was 17 of 25 for 230 yards, but he didn't find the end zone. He actually found the end zone with a 1 yard carry for a touchdown. So he didn't find the end zone through the air. The Pittsburgh Steelers were actually outrushed by the Los Angeles Rams, 135-86. But Najee Harris got 14 carries for 53 yards and a touchdown, and Jaylen Warren had 6 carries for 32 yards and a touchdown as well. So they got 3 touchdowns on the ground. So they definitely established themselves through the defense and through running the football, which is standard textbook Steelers football. So it doesn't surprise me. Matthew Stafford was 14 of 29 for 230 yards with a touchdown and an interception. Leading the way as far as running the football was Royce Freeman with 12 carries for 66 yards, but he didn't find the end zone. That went to Darrell Henderson Jr., who had 18 carries for 61 yards. So as far as the receiving aspect here, it was a quiet day for Cooper Kupp on the Rams side, but Puka Nacua led the way with 8 catches for 154 yards, but he didn't find the end zone. That went to Tutu Atwell with 1 catch for 31 yards. For Pittsburgh here, they had 2 top receivers with 5 catches each. George Pickens had 5 catches for 107 yards, but didn't find the end zone. And Deontay Johnson, in his first game back since week 1, 5 catches for 79 yards. So it's nice to have not 1 but 2 reliable receivers. Typically Najee Harris is pretty reliable out of the backfield, but he only had 3 catches for 15 yards in this game. So he typically, like I said, has better catches, better catching statistics out of the backfield, but this wasn't really his day. And he kind of hasn't played that well the last couple of seasons. He definitely showed that his rookie year, but we just haven't seen that in 22 or 23 thus far. So maybe if they can get him going, that'll help, but we just haven't seen that quite yet. Like I said, the Steelers improved to 4-2 in their division in the AFC North. And looking ahead to their scheduling here, as far as what the Pittsburgh Steelers got next year, they'll be home against the Jacksonville Jaguars on Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS, before a quick Thursday night showdown with the Tennessee Titans November 2nd at 8:15 p.m. Eastern. 10 days later, they host the Green Bay Packers November 12th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS, before traveling to Cleveland to face the Browns November 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. The following week, they're at the Cincinnati Bengals, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS, November 26th after that. So they got a couple of back-to-back AFC North showdowns there. The Jacksonville Jaguars game, that's going to be interesting because they'll be off of what I like to call a mini bye since they played the Thursday night game last week. So that'll be 10 days between games. And I'll probably have a prediction for you, a firm one on Sunday, but I'm leaning towards Jacksonville, even though Pittsburgh is at home. The quick turnaround against Tennessee is probably going to be tough just a few days later, so I'll have a prediction for you on that game as well. But having those 2 games within a week is always going to be tough for the teams involved. Pittsburgh, I don't know what to call it, but because in their 2 games that they lost, they've been blown out by a combined score of 60-13 between the Niners and the Texans. But when they win these games by 1 possession, all their games. They win their games by gritty, tough defensive plays and timely plays on offense at the end. So, with that being the formula thus far through 7 weeks, it's kind of hard to say what they are. So we'll have to take their schedule week by week, especially with the Cleveland and Cincinnati games to end November. But they could be 3-2 optimistically over the next 5 weeks or so. But having the Sunday and a Thursday night game put together the next couple weeks, and then those two games that are AFC North on the back end, those are all going to be physical games. So we'll just have to see what they do here. You got Green Bay squeezed in there, but Green Bay hasn't looked that good on offense. So just not very thrilled with Green Bay. And I expect Pittsburgh to get them problems. But like I said, we'll have a scheduled prognostication down the road. As far as the Rams go here, one thing I need to point out here with that 7-point margin, the Rams ended up cutting their kicker, Brett Maher, today because he missed three very important kicks for the Rams. He missed two field goals and an extra point. I'm not a mathematician, but that's 7 points, and you lost by 7. So if he makes all of his kicks, the Rams have a shot at winning this football game, basically. So, again, Brett Maher was cut by the Rams here today, and they're going to go ahead and go with a kicker off of the Indianapolis Colts practice squad by the name of Lucas Havrasik. They signed him to a deal. Maher, he's had a tough go the last couple of years because he was the kicker last year for the Dallas Cowboys. And because he missed 5 extra points in 2 playoff games, they got rid of him after the season. He came to Denver and was their kicker during training camp, but he missed a few kicks for them. They ended up cutting him and ended up going with Will Lutz over him and also kicker Elliott Fry, who was in camp as well for the Broncos. So Brett Maher, he's had a rough go. He's got to shake those demons and get himself back in a position where teams can probably feel like they can trust him again. Because that's rough between the Cowboys, the Broncos, and the Rams. That's 3 teams that he's been with over the course of a calendar year. So if he can get it together, hopefully that'll be a good thing. But the Rams are going in a different direction at kicker because they feel that directly contributed to their loss. And it's hard to blame them for that. It really is. Going back though and looking at the Rams' schedule here and seeing where they can bounce back here. They're at the Dallas Cowboys Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They then travel to Green Bay, 1 p.m. Eastern on November 5th before their bye week. They're then home against the Seattle Seahawks November 19th at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They're at the Arizona Cardinals November 26th at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox before they host the Cleveland Browns December 3rd at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So these next couple of games for the Rams are going to be tough. It's kind of alarming that their last 3 games were at home and they only managed to win one of them against the Cardinals. I mean, that's the Cardinals, but this Pittsburgh Steelers team and the Philadelphia Eagles a couple weeks prior to that came in and beat them by 1 possession. They just didn't hold down home very well. And to me, this Los Angeles Rams team, they're trending towards a team that just doesn't know how to get it done at crucial moments, as far as I'm concerned, because that's just kind of what they've shown. They shocked us at the early part of the year by beating Seattle, because I took Seattle to win that game to start the season, and we discovered who Puka Nacua was. They have great players, but the Pittsburgh Steelers kept Cooper Kupp in check, and I think that was a blueprint that other teams can use tape on and use that as a way to kind of stymie this offense. But they got 2 or 3 capable receivers. That's the only thing that I've really discovered about the Rams so far. With Dallas and Green Bay, those are going to each be tough because of the element of the Green Bay traveling to Green Bay, the frozen tundra and all that. I could see them taking that game, but Dallas is going to have a pretty solid day, in my opinion. I'll have a firm prediction for you come Sunday for that game, but I'm leaning towards Dallas. After the bye week with Seattle, Arizona, and Cleveland, that's going to really be a tough call for those games as well because, like I said, they've already beaten Seattle, but who's to say Seattle doesn't come to their house and beat them? I've seen that happen a lot of seasons with a lot of different divisional matchups. So the Rams, they're a mixed bag here, and I still got them as a question mark in my opinion. I just don't know what they are yet. The next game we're going to talk about here was another matchup here that took place between NFC West teams here. The Seattle Seahawks defeated the Arizona Cardinals 20-10. They hosted the Arizona Cardinals in this game here today. The Cardinals fell to 1-6, but the Seahawks improved to 4-2. They got touchdowns from Jake Bobo and Jackson Smith-Njigba, the rookie wide receiver. They each had a touchdown. For Geno Smith, he was 18 of 24 for 219 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Kenneth Walker led the way running the football with 26 carries for 105 yards, but did not find the end zone. As far as throwing the football, Joshua Dobbs was 19 of 33 for 146 yards, but didn't find the end zone. He did rush the ball for a touchdown with 7 carries for 43 yards. Their leading wide receiver or leading running back James Conner is still out. He's been placed on IR, so he's going to miss a few more games after this one as well. And Amari DiMercado, the running back starting in his place, had 13 carries for 58 yards, but didn't find the end zone. As far as the passing statistics here, like I said, Jackson Smith-Njigba, the rookie wide receiver for Seattle, he had 4 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown on 7 targets. And Jake Bobo, he had 4 catches for 61 yards and a touchdown as well on 5 targets. He's a rookie out of UCLA here. He's a rookie wide receiver, and he has 8 catches for 112 yards on the season. So this was definitely his best game for sure. So anytime you have rookies contributing for Seattle, that definitely goes to show you that they know how to draft well. And on the flip side, if you're the Denver Broncos, a lot of these guys could have been on your team if the Russell Wilson trade doesn't happen. So, yeah, leading the way for them was rookie wide receivers. And, Jackson Smith-Njigba, he only has 20 catches for 173 yards and a touchdown on the season. This was his first career touchdown, but if they can get these two guys going, DK Metcalf didn't play in this game here because he's suffering from a rib and a hip injury that he's dealing with. So this was actually his first missed game of his career. If you can keep these guys going and get them playing behind DK Metcalf and behind Tyler Lockett, they'll definitely have a solid team. Tyler Lockett had 4 catches as well, but they were only for 38 yards, and he didn't find the end zone. So that's why much of the press went to the rookies. With Seattle, they improved to 4-2, as I stated here, and they're 2-1 at home as a team. Just a half game back of the San Francisco 49ers as a result of San Francisco losing their second game in a row. And if you're Seattle, they were a wild card team last year, and if you're trying to win that division, there's still plenty of time. There's only been 7 weeks of football for you, so there's 11 left. 11 games left for Seattle. So if they can do anything, this is a great way to show that. Like I said, I know Arizona is not a great team here, but the games in your division truly matter. Those are the games that you definitely want to get. So, like I said, with Seattle improving to 4-2 and then looking ahead to their schedule, they're home against the Cleveland Browns October 29th at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox before traveling to Baltimore November 5th at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They're home against the Washington Commanders November 12th at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox before they travel to face the Los Angeles Rams November 19th at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. And then after that, they have a Thanksgiving Day game here. That's actually the nightcap for Thanksgiving. They're home against the San Francisco 49ers. Thanksgiving Day at 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. So they got a couple more divisional matchups here coming towards the end of the month here. But with Arizona and with the Rams having those games under your belt here, you're 1-1 in the division. So it's still hard to say what Seattle is in here. And if they can get victories over San Francisco, that's how I'll know they're legit. Because at the end of the month here, those games are a ways away, but they have a situation where they play San Francisco, Dallas, and San Francisco 3 straight weeks before they host the Philadelphia Eagles. So things are going to get tough for Seattle down the stretch for sure. So you need to get as many victories under your belt as you can. I'll have a prediction for you for this coming Sunday for Cleveland, but that could be a tough game here. We'll just have to see what Cleveland does on offense. That's kind of what I'm more worried about, more so than their defense. As far as the Cardinals, they're down. They officially have the worst record in the NFC at this time now, with the Giants winning and with them beating them head to head as well. So, just kind of back to what I've stated before with this team here. They're just not set to be anything as far as a contender. And I see them picking towards the top of the draft. The Cardinals also placed their tight end Zach Ertz on IR with a quad injury. So he's going to miss the next 4 games at minimum. They'll be hosting the Baltimore Ravens on Sunday, as I stated previously with Baltimore's schedule. Then they're at Cleveland November 5th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before hosting the Atlanta Falcons November 12th, 4:05 Eastern on CBS. They're at the Houston Texans November 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before hosting the Rams November 26th, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So I feel like honestly they should be 0-7 if Dallas came to play them back in week 3. Dallas, they just didn't take Arizona seriously, and Arizona in a way provided a blueprint of sorts against Dallas. But other than that, this team isn't a very good team. They're 1-6 for a reason. So down the stretch, if they go 0-5, 1-4, that's what we're looking at with the Cardinals. They're going to be picking atop the NFL draft again. And as for what player they're going to take, that remains to be seen, but they definitely need some players for sure. Switching gears here, we're going to talk about the afternoon games here before we cover the Sunday night football game and the Monday night football game matchup. The game we're going to discuss next is the Denver Broncos hosting the Green Bay Packers and getting the victory 19-17. PJ Locke, he was actually the safety that was in for Kareem Jackson after he was ejected from the game for another illegal hit. He's the one that got the game's winning interception off of Jordan Love here at the end of the game. Jordan Love was 21 of 31 for 180 yards with 2 touchdowns, but that interception at the end of the game is what sealed it for the Denver Broncos. Russell Wilson was 20 of 29 for 194 yards, and he did throw a touchdown in the game here to Cortland Sutton, who had 6 catches for 76 yards. As far as rushing the football, it was slightly even. Denver had 145 yards on the ground to Green Bay's 137. Javonte Williams led the day with 15 carries for 82 yards for the Broncos. Jaleel McLaughlin was slightly quiet with 5 catches for 45 yards, and Russell Wilson had 1 carry for 21 yards. On the flip side for Green Bay, A.J. Dillon had the most carries with 15 for 61 yards. Aaron Jones, he's been nursing a hamstring injury for the better part of the season here. He had 8 carries for 35 yards. And Jordan Love, he added another 3 carries for 21 yards. So it's pretty close statistically as far as yardage on the field, because again, each team had 194 yards passing. This game, to me, I actually had Green Bay winning, but what happened was Denver played better defense than they had in the past few weeks, and they made a timely play when it counted. So, not much to talk about with this football game here. As far as receiving statistics for Denver, Jerry Jeudy also had 5 catches for 64 yards, and Samaje Perine, the running back, actually added another 3 catches for 31 yards. As far as receiving for the Green Bay Packers, A.J. Dillon was also the leading receiver as well as rusher with 2 catches for 34 yards. And Romeo Doubs had 2 catches for 30 yards and a touchdown as well. The touchdown that he got was pretty controversial because what happened was he caught the ball in the end zone at the same time as the cornerback for Denver, Pat Surtain, II. And they both kind of had the ball kind of tucked as they hit the ground, and they were kind of like wrestling for it. And typically the tie, and according to NFL rules, I wasn't aware of this, typically the tie goes to the defensive player, and he had more control of the ball, in my opinion, than the receiver, but they gave the touchdown to Romeo Doubs even after reviewing it. So it didn't cost Denver the game, but that was just my thoughts on that. The touchdown that he did get shouldn't have even been a touchdown, in my opinion. As far as Denver goes, getting a win, that definitely gets them back on the right side of things here. They're a half a game out of third place at 2-5. The Chargers are just ahead of them at 2-4. The Las Vegas Raiders sit at 3-4, and like I said, Kansas City runs this division at 6-1. As far as Green Bay, they fall to 2-4. They're actually third place in the division now, just ahead of Chicago at 2-5. Minnesota sits ahead of them at 3-4, and Detroit is 5-2. I'm looking at the Denver Broncos schedule. They host the Chiefs this Sunday coming up here at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS before heading into their bye week. They're at Buffalo for Monday Night Football on November 13th. Then they host the Minnesota Vikings November 19th, tentatively scheduled for Sunday Night Football. They host the Cleveland Browns that following week at 4:05 p.m. Eastern, November 26th on Fox before traveling to Houston to visit the Texans 4:05 p.m. Eastern, December 3rd. So the Broncos have a game coming up this Sunday with the Chiefs, and then they get a bye week. I still don't see them beating the Chiefs because the Chiefs, to me, have won their games in different kinds of ways. They've blown out teams, but they've won close games. The one game that they lost was by a point to Detroit to start the season, and they haven't lost since. So I'm not expecting the Broncos to win this game because even with the Chiefs only scoring 19 points, the Broncos only mustered 8 in their game a couple weeks back. So that won't be enough to get the job done. As I said, the Broncos do have a bye week for week 9 before they travel to Buffalo. Buffalo, as inconsistent as they've been, I still can see them taking that game and winning that game over the Broncos. I'll have a firmer prediction as that week comes a couple weeks from now. But the Broncos, even with this victory, just haven't really shown me anything yet. Kareem Jackson, on the flip side here, I did get a report here that his suspension has been cut from 4 games to 2 games following his appeal. He was suspended for repeated violations of the league's unnecessary roughness rule. He was ejected against the Washington Commanders for a hit on Logan Thomas, the tight end. And the same thing with Packers tight end Luke Musgrave. He was ejected for an illegal hit on him as well. So He had been fined 4 times for this season for a total just short of $90,000. If you want to give money away, give it to me. But yeah, Kareem Jackson will still be available for the games following the Buffalo Bills game. So following the Buffalo Bills game on Monday Night Football, he'll be back for that. So the Broncos, like I said, I just don't know what they are, and getting a win is helpful in the win column, but I can still see them picking in the top 5, top 10 at worst for the NFL draft. That's just where they are to me. As far as the Green Bay Packers go, this loss here, they got to get back to the drawing board. Losing to Denver is not a good look. And hosting the Minnesota Vikings this Sunday, that isn't going to make things any easier. Jordan Love really has to get it together, plain and simple. He has not been consistent for this team, and he hasn't thrown for over 300 yards at all. They're averaging 199 yards passing per game, which is 23rd in the league. So they really got to pick that up here and help out A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones out of the backfield. The following week, they host the Los Angeles Rams November 5th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox before traveling to Pittsburgh to face the Steelers, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They're home against the Los Angeles Chargers November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox before their Thanksgiving clash with the Detroit Lions at Detroit on Thanksgiving Day to start that schedule off. So realistically speaking here, looking at the Packers schedule, they could be 1-4, and I wouldn't be surprised by that because they just don't play consistently as far as offense goes, and their defense is fair. Their defense is very fair. They're 21st in the league as far as points against, but they're also 17th as far as points for. They're about even as far as those numbers. They're about 22 in what the points they allow, and 22 as far as the points they score. So they're literally right in the middle as far as that goes. So over the next 5 weeks, it's just really hard to say. But until Green Bay shows me some sort of consistency, it's just hard for me to take them serious as a contender. So that's all I'll have to say about that. And then furthermore, in that division, nobody's is taking anything anywhere as far as that division goes outside Detroit, in my opinion. And if Green Bay has any kind of like shouting distance as far as games with Detroit, I would be very surprised by that. I'd be very, very surprised to see Green Bay in the mix. The next game we're going to talk about here, another afternoon game here that took place during the afternoon. That was the Kansas City Chiefs hosting Los Angeles Chargers in the AFC West clash, and they got the victory of 31-17. Patrick Mahomes went nuts on this team, as he always typically does here, and he had 4 touchdowns and over 400 yards passing on the day. 32 of 42 for 424 yards. He did throw 1 pick in the second quarter, but turned out to be inconsequential because the Chargers didn't get any points out of it. Justin Herbert, on the other hand, had a pretty awful day. Not pretty awful, but just below his standards. 17 of 30 for 259 yards and a touchdown to Joshua Kelly, but he had 2 interceptions. So I'm sorry, he had a tight end Gerald Everett in the second quarter, but he threw 2 interceptions. So definitely not a great day for him here. As far as rushing the football here, Kansas City only had 68 yards on the ground, but when Mahomes is slinging the rock like that, it doesn't really matter. Los Angeles, on the flip side, had 139 yards. Joshua Kelly had 7 carries for 75 yards and a touchdown. Austin Eckler actually had 14 carries, but was only able to muster 45 yards. For Kansas City, Isaiah Pacheco had 13 carries for 32 yards, and Patrick Mahomes was actually the second leading receiver with 4 carries for 29 yards. Travis Kelce was in the house, much like Taylor Swift. He had 12 catches for 179 yards and a touchdown. The 4 touchdowns went to 4 different receivers for Kansas City. Marquez Valdez-Scantling had a touchdown with 3 catches for 84 yards. Rookie Rashee Rice also had a touchdown with 5 catches for 60 yards, and Isaiah Pacheco had a receiving touchdown. That was his touchdown on the day, 4 catches for 28 yards. So Joshua Palmer had a fantastic day on the flip side, catching the ball for the receiving end for the Chargers. He had 5 catches for 133 yards on 7 targets. Keenan Allen, 4 catches for 55 yards on 9 targets. So not quite the day that you're typically accustomed to with Keenan Allen, as they kept him in check most of the day. And rookie Quentin Johnston, he had 1 catch for 20 yards on 2 targets. He's still trying to get his way into the offense. The Chiefs, again, after losing that opener to the Lions, they've won 6 straight games, and then I call their next victory over Denver a win as they travel to Denver on Sunday. Their game after that is going to be very interesting. They have an international matchup with the Miami Dolphins on November 5th. That game is taking place at 9:30 a.m. Eastern. That game is taking place in Germany at Frankfurt Stadium. I'm leaning towards the Chiefs because, as I stated earlier in the broadcast, the Dolphins have trouble with the contenders. That's the only teams that they seem to beat up on is the teams that are towards the bottom levels of their division and bottom rungs of the conference. So I'm going to call the Chiefs on that one for now, but things happen from week to week, so we'll just have to see how that's going to go. The Chiefs have a bye week before hosting the Eagles for Monday Night Football November 20th on ABC. They travel to Las Vegas that following Sunday, November 26th at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS, before traveling to Green Bay for Sunday Night Football December 3rd, 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. The AFC West, as I stated, it's Kansas City's to lose. And the only game, their next couple of games after Denver this Sunday are where things get interesting. They play the Dolphins and the Eagles, respectively. We'll talk about those two teams and their game that they had for Sunday Night Football next here. But give me them to beat Denver for sure. And if they can get that matchup over Miami and then head into their bye week with those two wins, they'll be sitting at 8-1 before their clash with Philly. And I think they'll be just fine after that. If Kansas City goes 13-4, that sounds about right to me, but I just don't know where the other three losses would come from. There'll just have to be a couple of surprises in a game where they just flat out get dominated. So Kansas City, they're in the driver's seat as far as the AFC, in my opinion. I just don't see them losing that division or not being the number one seed in the conference. The Chargers, man, if it wasn't for the ineptitude of the Raiders and the Broncos, I could see this being a last place team. And the question that I have is Justin Herbert's injured finger holding him back? He actually has a fractured finger on his non-throwing hand, and he's been trying to protect that finger a lot with his throwing hand, and that's kind of tough to do. It kind of throws you off your game a bit. So if it's affecting him, I'm not really sure. We'll have to see down the stretch if that is going to be something that really hurts him. They host the Bears for Sunday Night Football, October 29th on NBC, 8:20 p.m. Eastern. Then they are at the Jets for Monday Night Football, November 6th at 8:15 p.m. Eastern on ABC. They're back home to host the Detroit Lions, November 12th at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They're then at Green Bay, 1 p.m. Eastern, November 19th, before they host the Baltimore Ravens, November 26th at 8:20 p.m. Eastern, and that's going to be for Sunday Night Football. So they have a few primetime games coming up here. 3 of their next 5 games are actually primetime games. So people are going to get a really good look at the Chargers and get the good, nice, clear view of what they are as a team that they normally wouldn't get. So as far as the Bears, I'm going to hold off on predicting that game just because of the way that the Bears actually looked last week and the way that the Chargers have looked their last 2 games. They came out of their bye and they just haven't looked good. They're 0-2 out of their bye week, which is not very typical. So I'll have an official prediction for you for the Bears game coming up this Sunday. After that, with the Jets, Lions, Packers, and Baltimore Ravens, that's just hard to call with this Chargers team. They're just not very consistent, and they just don't make the plays that I think they should at the right time. The 2 victories that they have, I feel like were close games, and I feel like that had to do with a lot more with the coaching decisions of the other teams, more so to do with their victory and with their ability. So it's just hard to say. I'll have an official prediction for you against the Bears because the Bears have kind of put themselves in a better position in my eyes. So, like I said, we'll just have to see with this team here as far as the Chargers. But if they went 2-3 over the next 5 games, I wouldn't be shocked by that, especially with them being 2-4 at this time. They're probably one of my more disappointing teams so far to start the year. As far as I'm concerned, they're probably one of the more disappointing teams. And Kansas City, they're just doing what they do, plain and simple. Next, we're going to talk about the Sunday Night Football matchup that occurred here that took place between the Eagles and the Dolphins. This was a game I was definitely looking forward to, and I thought it would be closer. But as I said, the Dolphins don't play well against the contenders, and the Eagles got this one 31-17 to improve to 6-1 as the Dolphins unfortunately fall to 5-2. Jalen Hurts was 23 of 31 for 279 yards with 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. And he also ran the ball 11 times for 21 yards and a touchdown as well. After the first half, he did come back in the second half with a leg brace on. And they're saying it's not an issue, but we'll just have to see and just see if it does affect him as time goes on here. And they're saying it's not an issue, but he just didn't seem comfortable with the leg brace on. So we'll touch on that some more as the weeks go on here and as time goes on and they get more games under their belt. But they got the victory, and that's typically what matters. For Miami here, Tua Tagovailoa was 23 of 32 for 216 yards with a touchdown and unfortunately an interception as well. And the team only ran the ball 45 yards on the ground compared to Philly's 99, with Raheem Mostert carrying the ball 9 times for that 45 yards. For Philadelphia, DeAndre Swift had 15 carries for 62 yards and also had 3 catches for 13 yards as well. Jalen Hurts was the second leading receiver, as I mentioned, 11 carries, 21 yards, and a touchdown. Kenneth Gainwell had 8 carries for 16 yards and a touchdown as well. Looking back at this game here, Tyreek Hill, he had a pretty solid game. He had 11 catches for 88 yards and a touchdown. But that just wasn't enough to keep pace with keep pace with Philadelphia. A.J. Brown had 10 catches of his own for 137 yards and a touchdown on 15 targets. He was definitely a beast, and he had a wonderful game. Tight end Dallas Goedert, he got a touchdown early in the first quarter. He had 5 catches for 77 yards on 5 targets. He caught all 5 of the balls thrown to him. And wide receiver Devontae Smith, he had 4 catches for 49 yards on 5 targets. He was out targeted by AJ Brown 15-5, and it's been the case like that the last few weeks or so, because earlier in the season Devontae Smith was getting a lot of those targets. So it's kind of interesting to see that change, but nevertheless it's resulted in wins and it hasn't bothered them any. So I think they'll be fine in that regard. Jalen Hurts did fumble the football, so he had 2 turnovers in this game. And in total, he has 9 turnovers, which is more than he had all last season. So that is something to be slightly worried about if you're the Eagles. Even though you are winning games, you definitely want to get that under control. Plain and simple. As far as Miami goes, again, the teams that they've beaten are not contenders. The teams that the team that they beat at the beginning of the season, the Los Angeles Chargers at 2-4, is the best team that they've beaten. The New England Patriots, they're a 2-5 team. The Denver Broncos are 2-5. The Giants are 2-5, and the Carolina Panthers are 0-6. So the Miami Dolphins, as I've already stated, they beat teams that they should beat, but the teams that are up in the mix and they really want to get things going and solidified at the top of their conference and division, respectively, they can't beat those teams, or they haven't proven to thus far. So it'll be back to the drawing board for the Dolphins. I'm curious to see what they are over the course of the next 5 weeks or so. Regarding the Eagles, they're at the Washington Commanders this Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they host the Dallas Cowboys that following week, November 5th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox. That'll be their first clash of the season. They have a bye week, and then, as I mentioned, they're at the Kansas City Chiefs for Monday Night Football, November 20th. And I'll have a prediction for you down the line as that game gets closer. The Eagles then host the Buffalo Bills just 6 days later, on November 26th at 4:25 p.m. Eastern. Then after that, they host the San Francisco 49ers December 3rd, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So things are going to get really interesting for the Philadelphia Eagles. We're definitely going to see what they got. Because after Washington, that 5 games, those are contenders. Those are guys that we'll see where Philadelphia sits for real. For real, for real. I put them at the top of the NFC for now because San Francisco's lost back-to-back games. But we're going to see what they are. And Philadelphia head-to-head against San Francisco at the beginning of December is going to be huge because they'll be hosting the 49ers for that game. So, yeah, Philadelphia, they're sitting at 6-1, but we're still going to get a measure of how good they really are as a team. If they can beat Washington and Dallas heading into their bye week, that'll have them at 8-1. Now they'll allow Jalen Hurts' knee to get healthy if there is any issues, and I'll allow them to regroup and get ready for Kansas City. So Philadelphia, they're sitting pretty at the top of the conference at the moment, but they're still going to get tested. They're still going to get tested for sure. And like I said, going back to the Dolphins, looking at their next 5 games here, they host the Patriots this coming Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before traveling to Germany to face the Kansas City Chiefs November 5th. Then they have their bye week as well before hosting the Las Vegas Raiders November 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they're at the New York Jets for a game actually on Black Friday. That's at 3 p.m. Eastern. There's going to have games the day after Thanksgiving this year, which they typically don't do. So that should be interesting. After that, they're at the Washington Commanders 9 days later, December 3rd at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So with the Miami Dolphins here, they got a couple of games here that I feel like they're going to win just because that offense is so dynamic. But what I want to know is if they can beat the teams that are really going to matter. That Kansas City game is definitely a game I'm going to keep a close eye on. Because if they can't get that game, if they slip up at all against their divisional opponents like New England next week or like the Jets later on in November, that's going to show if they're good or not. That's going to put them in the position that they need to be, depending on if they win or lose. And from there on, that'll let me know where they sit. If they can beat Kansas City, that'll make things interesting. But I just don't know if they can. I genuinely don't know if they can. Kansas City looks like the best team in the AFC, and then there's just a few teams sitting below them. So, the last football game we're going to talk about here, and then I'm going to just let you know the games for the NBA schedule before we close out here. The Monday Night Football game that occurred last night, the Minnesota Vikings defeated the San Francisco 49ers by a score of 22-17. Like I said, this is San Francisco's second loss in a row following a 5-0 start. They lost to the Jets last Sunday, and of course lost to the Vikings this week here. So they're 5-2. The Vikings improved to 3-4 and got themselves out of the cellar of the NFC North. Kirk Cousins was 35 of 45 for 378 yards and 2 touchdowns to 1 interception. And he's been pretty phenomenal, like I've said all year. He's been fantastic. Both of his touchdowns went to Jordan Addison, who had 7 catches for 123 yards. And he definitely showed out. He had a fantastic game. On the flip side for San Francisco, Brock Purdy was 21 of 30 for 272 yards and a touchdown, but he had 2 interceptions here, so he didn't have a great game. This is his second game in a row where he just hasn't looked that good. And San Francisco, there was a lot of question as to whether Brock Purdy was an elite quarterback or not, and in my opinion, he's not. He's shown that he fits well in his system, and he shows that he fits well, and he does what he needs to when there's weapons around, but this San Francisco team was missing Debo a lot, and they were also missing Trent Williams at left tackle. So I feel like those 2 elements made things tougher on the 49ers. Yeah, I know they only lost by 5 points, but that definitely made things tough on them here. Christian McCaffrey, he had a very average game. He did get 2 touchdowns, but as far as yards from scrimmage, he only had 96 yards. 15 carries for 45 yards, and he also had 3 catches for 51 yards. He had a 35-yard receiving touchdown, and that was the highlight of his game as he battled through that oblique injury. But the Niners only got 65 yards on the ground. Minnesota was no better with 74 yards. Alexander Mattison had 8 carries for 39 yards. Cam Akers followed him up with 10 carries for 31 yards. So not a lot going for either team on the ground. As far as the receiving goes, T.J. Hawkinson, he had 11 catches for 86 yards but didn't find the end zone to go along with Jordan Addison's wonderful day. And Brandon Powell had 4 catches for 64 yards but didn't find the end zone as well. For the receivers on San Francisco, their 3 leading receivers each had 5 catches but didn't find the end zone. George Kittle had 78 receiving yards on 7 targets. Brandon Ayuk had 57 receiving yards on 6 targets. And Jawan Jennings had 54 yards on 9 targets. So he was actually the most targeted receiver. Back to the drawing board for San Francisco. After starting out 5-0, they've now lost 2 straight games. And they do sit atop of the NFC West, but that's just by half a game. They're just a half a game up on Seattle. And Seattle's playing pretty decent football, pretty solid football. So San Francisco is definitely going to want to step it up here. I'm looking at their schedule here. They host the Cincinnati Bengals before they head into their bye week. The 49ers, in my opinion, I honestly think they're beatable unless you're Dallas. That's just kind of how it feels. And looking at the other teams they've played the Steelers, the Rams, the Giants, and the Cardinals. The same argument can be made for San Francisco that could be made for Miami. They haven't really beaten a contender yet. And Cleveland and Minnesota, I don't consider them contenders, but I consider them teams with great pass rush. And I think that's what happened in both of these games. I'm not saying San Francisco is out of anything. I'm not saying sell your stock and move on. But they definitely need to get it together. Against Cincinnati this Sunday, 4:25 p.m. Eastern, I think they can, even though Cincinnati's coming off a bye week. They'll have their own bye week before they head to Jacksonville November 12th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They're home against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers November 19th at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox, November 19th, before they have a game on Thanksgiving at the Seattle Seahawks, 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. 10 days after that, they're at the Philadelphia Eagles, which is a game I touched on a little bit ago. I'm curious to see who's going to win that game at Philadelphia, 4:25 p.m. Eastern, December 3rd. It's kind of hard to call games with San Francisco. They're not just going to roll through everybody. And this is the NFL. We're really going to see who's going to do what, who's going to be bad, who's going to be good. and who's a mixed bag. I'm refusing to call San Francisco a mixed bag. I still think they're a solid football team. They're just not better than Philadelphia at the moment. They're still better than the Cowboys. The Cowboys have lost their couple games as well, but if they want to be on par with Philadelphia and if they want to have home field over Philadelphia, which they didn't have in the NFC Championship, you got to get that game and all the games leading up to it. But I'm not writing off San Francisco by any means. They've just had a couple of games where they just haven't played well, and both those games were on the road too. Coming back home against the Bengals before a bye week, I think that'll fix things for them. Like I said, I'm not writing off the 49ers by any means, and they're still going to be a contender. They're still going to be in the mix. So that wraps up the football aspect here. Again, I'm going to give you the games for tonight before we get out of here as far as the NBA goes. The Nuggets are actually currently leading the Lakers 54-40 in the second quarter with about 4 minutes to go here. So they're off to a terrific start here. We'll have highlights and kind of discuss the NBA season as the season goes on. I'll typically be discussing the sports outside of football on Thursday. I typically reserve Sunday and Tuesday for football coverage, but Thursdays are going to be the show where I discuss more of the other sports and just only touch on the Thursday night game. Thanksgiving Day, for example, that'll be an earlier broadcast because I'll just be strictly touching on the Thanksgiving Day games. That won't really be that type of broadcast, but all the Thursdays going forward, that's typically how that's going to go. And then this Thursday coming up here, we'll know who's going to be in the World Series as well. So I'll have highlights on that. The Texas Rangers already punched their ticket, winning Game 7 over the Houston Astros last night. So the Astros, unfortunately, won't be going to a third straight World Series, but Texas Rangers, they'll be there. And we'll find out who they're playing later on tonight as the Diamondbacks and Phillies have their Game 7 in the NLCS. So basically, that wraps up the broadcast here. Again, I'm going to have more NBA coverage for you on Thursdays as things go on here. But as I stated here, the Nuggets are leading the Lakers here in the second quarter. The Warriors will be hosting the Suns, and that game is taking place at 10 p.m. Eastern on TNT. So if you have TNT, you'll be able to see the Warriors and Suns open up their schedule. And tomorrow night, all the games get started. Everybody else gets going for the NBA. So a lot of sports going on. Lots of stuff to talk about, as you already know here. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of The Hype Show. I do appreciate you joining me here. Sub to the channel if you haven't done so before here. And if you're not new here, thank you so much again for joining me for another broadcast. This has been The Hype Show. And again, I'll be back for you on Thursday with another broadcast for you. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And I am Big J all day, a.k.a. the Mighty Big J. And again, this is The Hype Show. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.